Good afternoon. Is it afternoon? Yes, it is afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for watching at home. This is the latest of I don't know how many, 6 panel discussions, conversations that we have as part of the Comedy Festival under the banner of Beyond a Joke. And we talk about, the idea is that we talk about contemporary issues linked to comedy. And this discussion that we're going to have is about Get Off live comedy, which hopefully people are aware of, but we will learn more about it as we go on. My name's Geoff Rowe. I'm the founder of Leicester Comedy Festival, and I'm delighted that Nina's joined us as one of the founders.
Yes, that's correct.
Get Off live comedy. Can you just start off, Nina, by just telling us a bit about you and your comedy career, I guess.
Okay, hello, thank you so much for coming. So I'm Nina Gilligan. I started comedy in 2011, just on the circuit in Manchester, and I've been going for quite a few years now and gradually just building things up. So I want to give, I suppose, a slight trigger warning before we start, because the reason I set up with Kiri, Pritchard-McLean, this organisation, was in response to sexual harassment that I'd experienced as a comic coming into the circuit. So we will be touching a little bit on maybe some experiences and what sexual harassment looks like. So yeah, that's a bit about me, really. There's not much more to tell. I love Leicester now.
We'll come on to that later.
Yeah.
We'll come on to that later. So, and things are going quite well for you. You recently won an award. You should talk about that.
Oh, Geoff. So last week, was it? I think it was last week. I won the British Comedy Award for Best Club Act, which was a complete joy. And I do feel like I have a lot to thank Leicester for, because a few years ago I won the Leicester Mercury Award, and as an unsigned act, even though I've been going a few years, and I think basically it's because I was a bit older. I think I've been a bit overlooked. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, probably.
So I think Leicester gave me a little leg up, and then from that I've had a bit more interest, and then hello, come in.
Are we in the right place?
I don't know.
4 o'clock, Get Off live.
Yes,
come
on
in.
in.
You're absolutely in the right place.
Come on in.
Hello, lovely.
Thank you for coming. That's okay. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Lauren.
We were just introducing ourselves, so you've not missed anything mega. But Nina, so can you just, you've sort of touched on it already, but when did Get Off live comedy, when did the idea of Get Off live comedy start?
So there was an actual moment in time. So there was a real genesis for it. So what happened during lockdown, I don't know if male comedians were bored, but what happened, there was a flurry of allegations online of comedians on things like Facebook outing other comedians about alleged sexual harassment. And that, to me, as someone who'd experienced sexual harassment, was increasingly making me feel more anxious, because I think whenever someone starts to do that on behalf of somebody else, you're not particularly thinking about what the impact might be on the victim and how that might make them feel, and if there's going to be any repercussions for the victims. But there was a lot of chat, but not a lot of talk about how we were going to deal with it. Then Kiri, Pritchard-McLean wrote a really brilliant article about how women in this industry, particularly women at that point, were relying solely on what we called the Whisper Network to keep each other informed and safe on the circuit, and how that is completely problematic because it depends on a number of things: who your friends are, where you are in the country, which circuit you're on, if you're new to the industry, if you've only just come in, you don't have anybody to talk to, which is what happened to me. And she'd put in this, wouldn't it be great if we had a HR in comedy? Now, I had never spoken to anyone about what happened to me,
And sorry to interrupt, but what happened to you happened within the comedy world.
Yes, so what happened to me, in a nutshell, like I said, trigger warning for everybody. So what happened to me, I had only been going probably a year, and a man that was very well known in the industry, quite a low level promoter, suddenly saw me do a gig and told me I was the best thing since sliced bread. Now, who doesn't react positively to a compliment about that? But what he started to do over a period of time is, and if any of you know anything about domestic violence, I used to be a probation officer, that's my background. There was a sort of period of isolation where he sort of took me away almost and crowded me away from all the other voices and just started to kind of put me in a corner and say, well, you don't really need anyone else, you just need me. I can do this for you. I'm going to do this. And he started to giving me bigger gigs than maybe that I deserved for my actual ability level. It got to the point where he was phoning me on a daily basis to talk to me about comedy. And for all of you, because I know, like, Lauren, you're a comedian, like, it's an obsession, isn't it? You do it out of love. So you're quite happy to talk to somebody about comedy. But then he was doing things like testing the boundaries. And occasionally he would drop in something into conversation about maybe an ex-partner that he'd been seeing. And then developing it into something that was looking more like, oh, are we mates now? Do you want to come out with me? I'm going to watch this comic tonight. So the boundaries were just gradually be getting pushed. So I don't want to go into the whole story, but it was a spectrum. And what happened eventually is he put me forward for a corporate gig. Now, as a newcomer, if you've only been doing it for a short amount of time, you probably shouldn't be doing corporates. There's no way that I had the skill to do a corporate. But it was for HMRC, so for the, that sounds like it's going to be safe. And it was in a place that it was a youth hostel. I have to be really careful about what I'm saying. I'm sort of censoring myself because I also can't reveal who it was. And when I came off stage, I was given a bottle of wine that was already open. And then in a communal area, he basically sexually assaulted me. So I went to a room that I thought was safe to go to bed where there was another comic, and I woke up in the middle of the night with this promoter trying to sexually assault me again naked in the bed. And then I got rid of him and he came back and did it again. And after that, in the morning, he still tried to groom me into trying to tell me really over and over again that this was just him chancing his arm with a woman that he found attractive. And I kept that secret for probably about 5 years. So I suppose why I'm telling you this is because I think it can just be insidious over a period of time. And what I didn't have was any kind of reporting structure or anywhere to go or anywhere to tell or anywhere to talk to, anyone to talk to about it. So that was my experience. And unfortunately, and we'll come on to this, I'm sure, from the research we've done, I'm not the only person that has experienced something of that behaviour somewhere on that spectrum. It might not have got to that, it might have actually got worse, or it might be somewhere down here.
Mm-hmm. So you knew Kiri?
Yeah.
And she wrote an article.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can tell the story, but then you and her had a conversation about forming something called Get Off Live Comedy.
What we really thought was the way to make it work it wouldn't be good enough just to kind of set up a HR. What we needed was something to really bind it together. So we came up with this idea of a kite mark. We thought if we could have a kite mark that advertised really to people in the industry that the people that join this membership are agreeing to a certain set of standards. Our dream at the beginning was that everybody would have it, and then if you didn't have it, it would send a bigger message that if you weren't in the club, then you were out the club. We're not there yet, I'm not going to lie. But that was the original idea, because we had consultations and we spoke to a lawyer and he was like, well, how is this going to work? And the minute we talked about the kite mark, he said, I get it. Right. The kite mark's really integral to it.
Yeah. So tell the people here and the people watching, how does Get Off Live comedy work? What's the sort of right now? You've got an aspiration which you've mentioned, but right now, or how has it been working over the last year or so? What do you offer people?
Right. So gosh, this is the technical bit. I need to sort of tell you the technical.
Okay.
Because people don't really know. So the 2010 Equalities Act sort of states that any employer is liable for their employee to take reasonable measures to prevent sexual harassment to their employee. Now that goes one step further than it used to go. So what used to happen is all that you needed to do, Geoff, was have a sexual harassment policy. But that's not enough now. So as a statutory defence, what you would need to have done is something like provide a risk assessment. So what we provide is, to your club, we will give you a sexual harassment policy, but we've also got a risk assessment procedure that we take you through, and we give you training. So if you join up with us, it's very simple. We make it as simple as possible because we know exactly what people are like in this industry. We remove as many barriers as possible for you to sign up. You just have to do an induction training where we explain all of this. And then we give you a sexual harassment policy and you do our risk assessment, and then there is ongoing training, and it's means tested. So if you're a one-man band, you pay like 20 quid, and a bigger club might pay something up to like 400, 600 pounds. So that's sort of the system, that's how it works. And that means that you can do something as simple as phone our HR if you need HR advice from an employer point of view, but anybody on the circuit who is working in live comedy can use our HR service at any time if they just want to report a concern or just ask for advice. And that is up and running.
So there's, you mentioned technical bit a minute ago, but so you mentioned clubs. It's open to promoters, venues, clubs, festivals. Anybody who is producing live comedy can sign up, and presumably then use the kite mark to say
yes,
that we are part of.
We've had challenges with that, and I'm going to be honest, because we've had people come to us that have gotten quite rightly, they've gone, I've got a feeling, because I've heard a whisper, that you shouldn't have them as part of Get Off.
Yeah.
And our ethos at this moment in time is, wouldn't we have them in the membership first to try and bring them to a standard and hold them to account, rather than nobody have eyes on? So that's the kind of ethos we're going for. And that's where the culture change comes in. We want to be an open, transparent comedy industry that we love, and do it in a positive way where we can re-educate. This isn't about going after people. This is about kind of welcoming everybody in and trying to raise standards. And you really can't hold people to account unless you work with them. So it's about trying to be as kind of as welcoming and open as possible in the first instance. And then if people won't work with us when we've given them maybe risk assessment advice, then we'll kind of go, well, then maybe you can't stay.
And the from a performer's point of view, so there's sort of two strands to Get Off Live comedy.
Yeah.
One is the kite mark bit for promoters, producers, whatever, festivals, whatever. But any comedian in the UK, presumably,
yes,
can use your
Ireland.
HR support.
Yeah, Northern Ireland.
Sorry?
And Northern Ireland, yeah.
And Northern Ireland. So they can phone you up or email somebody and say, this has happened, and you can get advice. And that's free advice.
Free advice.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm interested, I've worked in the industry for 30 years, and over that time, and this is not a sort of flippant, I don't say this lightly, comedians and people in the industry have moaned about things for ages.
Yeah.
Different things, all sorts of different
course.
kind of things about standards and, this is right and this is wrong and whatever. you mentioned you knew Kiri and you saw the article that she wrote. It's quite unusual, I think, for comedians to actually do something. And I don't mean that in a horrible way at all, but people moan about stuff, but you two actually got up and you've set this thing up. You're a limited company. You've done it. You mentioned earlier on that you worked in probation and stuff. What? Because you didn't have to do it. You could have just said, "Oh, I'll leave that to somebody else," or "I hope somebody else does it." What do you think? And maybe it was your own personal experience, but what motivated you both to actually do it?
I think probably the answer's in the question. I think you just get tired, don't you, waiting for somebody else to do things. And I think sometimes you just think, well, okay, we've got an idea here that sounds like proportionate. To me, I think from the probation background anyway, I felt like it sounded fair and there was just a sense of like it was workable and fair. And what I was seeing was hysterical, and I mean this in the true sense of the word, what I was seeing was hysteria. And I just thought, if we can just pour some cool water on this, maybe we can get something going. I'm not a special person in the sense that I think I have special powers in being able to get up and just do something. And I knew, and Kiri's the same. I think Kiri just has a great sense of integrity in the terms of that she really does want to get things done, and she's very pragmatic. And I think this sort of, coming together as people that are pragmatic and want to get things done, we just thought, we'll give it a go. And Kiri, had far much more profile than I did and do. And she had lots of contacts and lots of people she could call upon. And I had this background in kind of risk assessment, and that probation thing I think really helped. So I think together we were able to sort of merge those things.
So this was just remind me, when was this?
So this was pandemic, so this was 2020?
2020, okay.
Yeah.
So you got together and you thought, right, we'll set this thing up, and presumably the two of you had conversations about what it was going to be.
Yeah.
And then presumably you've mentioned you've talked to other people, and you didn't say focus groups, but you've chatted to other people.
Yeah, we had focus groups.
You had those as well. Talk to us a bit about the industry reaction when it got out there that you were doing this, because I suspect there was a little bit of, oh, for goodness sake, what are they doing now?
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that from an industry point of view, what the reaction was to what you were doing?
I think there was like a surge of like, oh, what's this? And there was some misconceptions. There was some hilarious misconceptions of, but I book women. But I was like, no, we're not on the right page here. So there's some hilarious misconceptions about what we were trying to do. People thought it was, A, are we trying to tell you who to put on the lineup? B, are we trying to stop you? Is it censorship? Are we trying to tell you what to say on stage? Are we trying to interfere with your business models? So I think there was fear mixed with a sense of relief that somebody else was tackling it, mixed with some extreme positivity of people wanting to get on board, so a real mix of reactions actually of people wanting to ally themselves with us. Some kind of more established organisations who were at the time set up, like the LCA and people like that, and Equity, going, you can't just go setting yourself up as an organisation, just two individuals. You're not legit, which is fair. So, we had to have conversations with them about where we were coming from. So there was just a huge sort of mix really going on, which is right, which is why we had the focus groups, and it's why we were like, yeah, come in and tell us what you want. And I don't want to own this. Kiri and I want to hand it over to the industry and go, this is yours, this is your initiative. In 10 years, I just want to go, that runs without me having anything to do with it. So,
and it's maybe important to mention, the Get Off Live comedy is not, it's not just for women.
Not at all.
So the thing you just said about people who said, well, I book women, there was a misunderstanding.
A total misunderstanding. So we did a massive survey, which I'm really proud of, in conjunction with the University of Sunderland, that's peer reviewed, and we got 842 responses for that. So we were quite a small industry, so it's like significant, and over 50% male responses, which we were really pleased with. And it's 1 in 6 that have experienced sexual harassment. It doubles for women, it's 1 in 3. But after that, you know, it's men, it's non-binary. So it happens to everybody. And we've never been gender specific. Everyone assumes we're being gender specific, but we never have been. It's not in any of our literature. So if you go onto our website, we don't talk about women. What's important to remember, if you dig under the statistics, yes, it does affect women more significantly, and it does affect younger women more significantly. But what's really important, we talk about that in our risk assessment, is that if you only think that, then you have blinders up, and then that older woman or that older man is going to be sexually harassed, and you've not put measures in place to prevent that. So you should always think about everybody when you're doing a risk assessment.
And I think within the industry, the idea of just having a risk assessment would blow some people's minds, because that's not a natural thing for comedy promoters in my experience.
It's like and it's so like I love a risk assessment. So
that's not a phrase I thought I'd ever hear you say.
I know, I do. I think it's because of probation. I love it. I was just looking at hours again today to remind myself, and the first sentence was about. I know, I'm going to bore you. But first sentence was about, like, you know, if you work late at night. So these are the things that TUC say. So, if you work late at night, if you work with alcohol, if you're a lone worker. So just translate that into comedy straight away. So you, position of power, ask a newer comic to go and pick up somebody to bring them to the gig. And as a gesture of goodwill, you filled the fridge in the green room with alcohol. And then you say, can you drop them home after? You've already massively increased risk. Not because you wanted to, just because you thought you were being a nice promoter by paying people in beer. You know? So it's just such a simple tool to use, isn't it? To think about how we can sort of just reduce that risk and just think a little bit more carefully about how we keep each other safe. So
your 2 times 2 is 4 became 2 times 4 is 8. So that's a bigger risk, right? I know a bit about risk assessments.
I know you do. That's Geoff. You love a risk assessment.
I'm not sure I love them, but I know how to do them. And there must. I don't know. Tell us. There must have been times where. How long did it take for you to actually set it up?
Oh, forever. Just forever.
Like a year?
Yeah, at least a year. Because we're not still, I would say we're like a third of the way there.
Okay.
So until, in my mind, and in Kiri's and everybody that's on board, the dream is we can't kind of go to tribunal. Not that I want to go to tribunal, but we couldn't do the full process with somebody unless the club's on board and the member or the person that's been affected has come forward, and we've done all the interviews and gone through the process. So the more clubs we have on board, then we could do it. But at the moment, because we've not got everyone on board, if somebody makes a phone call and it's about a club they've been to that's not a member, then we're only doing half the job to me, which I find like, even though we're doing good work, I don't want us just to be a helpline. And we're not just a helpline, because Lindsay does amazing work in what she tells people and how she informs people about their rights, and that's very empowering. But it's still not enough for me. I'd love it if everybody was on board and it was just the thing you did, like PRS. That's what Kiri always said. It's the thing you've got to pay every year because it's standard. And it's also, it's not just your legal obligation now, it's your moral obligation, I think.
There must have been times, I guess, in that year, there was lots of enthusiasm at the beginning from you and
100%.
Kiri and some other people. There must have been points where you thought, oh, we can't do this.
Yeah, 100%.
It's a nightmare, and what are we doing? And it's never going to work. Can you talk to us a bit about that? Was there anything specific that you thought?
Money is a huge issue.
Money, okay.
Money is a massive issue. So, like, when we initially set up, like, all the positive people ran forward and went, yeah, we're going to give you our money. And then it's like, emails, where are they? So it costs us £2,000 a month just to keep going.
Right.
And we don't have £2,000 a month. So that's being funded privately. It's coming from here, there and everywhere. So our sustainability at the moment is really hard. So what we're doing is we're relying on fundraisers, and that was never the business model. So money is just our biggest issue, and that just hurts me all the time. It hurts all of us all the time.
Did any of the negative voices that were around, you spoke about that a minute ago, did any of that make you more determined, or make you think, oh, we can't do this?
Yeah, in my head, I'll be completely honest with you, and I'm not sure I've said this out loud, so I'm not sure why I'm saying it here. You've got to weigh, Geoff. I think part of me goes to myself on bad days, I'm like, well, if you don't want it, why am I forcing you to have it? This is for you. If you don't want it as a collective, then why are we forcing you? Of course, then you have to take a deep breath and go, nobody's ringing each other up going, well, we don't want it, do we? You've just got to take a step back and think, slowly, one by one, we'll hopefully, get people. But if we don't, we have to face the reality that we offered it. People said they want it because we went out there and we asked the question first, with the focus groups. They said they wanted it. We spoke to people in the industry. If it turns out that this isn't for them, we can't force feed people.
No, absolutely. So it's been going for a couple of years or so. This is the wrong way of phrasing. How's it going? have you had lots of people phone the helpline?
Yeah, we do have lots of people.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. Lots of people.
I mean, aside from, we'll talk maybe about the money side of it and stuff and how it's set up in a minute, but in terms of how's it going, how is it going?
Now, it's interesting because if you talk to promoters, they'll tell you things like, oh, I've never heard of it. But if you talk to comedians, I think they're lying. If you talk to comedians, they've all heard of it. And that is borne out by the fact that phone calls to Lindsay are all the time.
So Lindsay's the HR person who provides the support, right?
And Lindsay's very busy all the time. So she gets phone calls all the time from comedians, from anyone on the circuit, not just comedians who are experienced or have experienced some kind of problematic behaviour. Right. Just as a caveat to that, we are probably about the same as any other industry from what we saw in our survey, because I don't want anyone to go away with this idea that we are horrendous. It's just we don't have anything in place to address it. But we are very busy. If you think that we're trying to do the job of we're one HR in one industry, so we're busy. Yeah, she's busy.
Just out of interest, it's not just comedians that could get HR support, people who work in it's a bar staff or
not bar
promoters.
Staff. Promoters,
producers
yes.
could.
If you are employing staff on your premises, like Jess is a massive advocate of ours at the Frog and Bucket. Yeah. She's great. She's got all the stuff up in the premises, so who to go to report to, all that kind of thing. So if her bar staff were experiencing something, they count as her employees. So they would go to her. We are coming into her venue to work in comedy, so that's where that's where we sit.
Okay.
We can't be responsible for your employees. So it's a slightly, we sit in a slightly different place, if that makes sense.
No, I think it's useful to make that distinction,
Yeah, absolutely.
just so people know. If there's people watching this, people in the room who are venues and promoters or other people involved in comedy, I know you're going to say money, so park that for a minute. What do you need right now in terms of, you mentioned money is a big issue and sustainability is an issue. In terms of keeping this thing going, what support do you need? And I'm not going to ask you to kind of look down the camera and do a plea directly to the camera, although you could if you want. But what can people do? What's the best thing? Obviously, promote it as a thing.
Yeah.
But it strikes me that you need something other than that, or in addition to that.
We need boots on the ground is what we need. So what we really need, and we spoke to the lovely Owl Network a couple of weeks ago, which is a network for women in comedy. We need ambassadors, really. What we need is people on the ground in their own specific areas who are willing to work for us in their locality and kind of be a sort of accounts manager and kind of tell us who's there, who we can approach. If they feel that they've got a relationship that doesn't jeopardise their own working relationship, and approach them to sign up. So that's the kind of thing that we really need at the moment. There's nothing like a face-to-face contact with somebody or an introduction to somebody, because there's nobody that I've never had a discussion with someone like this face-to-face where they've turned around to me and gone, that's a terrible idea. I'm not joining that. But I think just by emailing people, it's just so easy, isn't it? Just to kind of go, So I think really what we need now more than anything is just to grow our membership. And we can really do that with some ambassadors on the ground in different areas. I recruited one this morning from the southwest. So if you're in an area of the country where you feel like you've got connections, or you just know of a club or something, and it could be anyone, it can be like just a one-person band that has one night a month, you know, you can still get that kite mark. I think it's important also to look at it from an audience's perspective. Audiences want to know that they're spending their money in an ethical way now. And you know, this is another way to do that. People want to have that opportunity. So I think if you're an audience member and you're not a comedian, you know, tell your promoter, tell your local club, why aren't you a member of that Get Off? We'd like to see you become a member. If you're attending this festival, ask why the Leicester Comedy Festival, you know, ask them to become a member. You know, if you believe in it and you think it's got some worth, you as the audience have more power than anybody actually to make the culture change. That's what I'd say.
So that geographical network that in your head would be brilliant to have could be made up of people in the industry, comics, or it could be members of the audience. And at the moment there's a central board of people which is slightly broader than you and Kiri.
Yes.
But that's the organisation, right, at the moment. There is nobody else. It's not some highfalutin secret thing where you've got a massive office and infrastructure and all that. It's just a few people who've carried on flying the flag and saying this is important. So if you had that geographical network, is there anything else that people could do? I'm thinking of, I mean, you sort of talked about it a little bit, but I'm thinking of, I mean, it would be great if nobody's come to me, as far as I know, as from an audience point of view, and said, why is Leicester Comedy Festival not a member of the network? Publicity and promotion, national media coverage.
We've had some national media coverage. We've had like brilliant Guardian journalist, Rachel Healy, she's done a few things for us, but just keeping that up, we need to keep that going, and we need to have dedicated volunteers people on the board. We need to have dedicated people that will just kind of be able to take over some of those responsibilities for us, so that we can do. We're only so many people, so we just need more focused, pushing and just getting bigger, really.
And presumably Edinburgh is on your horizon.
Yeah.
I mean, you've mentioned Leicester Comedy Festival a few times, which is absolutely fine.
I'm only kidding.
I know you are, but Edinburgh is presumably part of your plan.
Absolutely.
And do you have something in your head even that you would like to do in, where are we now, February, so in August of this year?
Kiri and I have talked about trying to get Edinburgh to put a penny on a ticket.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
That would really help us. We could increase, even a penny on a ticket in Edinburgh would help us increase the amount of hours we could have for HR. Something like that would sort us out for a year. So, we've got ideas of fundraising.
Because at the moment you've done and are doing a few fundraising events, but
it's piecemeal.
Yeah. So how would something like this? So I've kept saying so far, don't talk about the money side of it. So let's talk about the money side of it. How would it be sustainable longer term? You've talked about a penny on tickets for Edinburgh, for example, and benefit shows, but how would it become financially sustainable?
The original model is if we looked at the industry on the whole, and if everybody paid their membership, that's enough. With the odd fundraiser here and there if we wanted to do something else.
And membership fees are what? I think you did.
They are a penny on a ticket.
Oh right, okay.
So that's how it's means tested.
Okay.
We may have to relook at that because the membership's growing in rather than our fantasy that they would all join all at once. So that was a misstep.
Yeah.
So we think if we got to the kind of numbers that we wanted, that would sustain itself, along with other things, along with maybe, because the training we're developing is really good now, so we might be able to sell training packages, and we can do enhanced training packages and things like that. So there are other ways of generating money, and we're looking at different funding streams, pots of money that we can possibly tap into. But that, as you know, is a huge job in itself. So we need something that's kind of fluid, that will just keep us going easily, really. And I think because the industry owns this, we're not really eligible for some of that kind of other funding. So we need the industry to pay for it. So in the long term, we just need to look at just making sure we get the bigger, just to do things like maybe get help from festivals, just, and just work out how to do that.
Were there any other models of is there anything like this in other? I'm thinking of the music industry, but that might be. The music industry is very different to the live comedy industry in this country. Is there something similar? Other things that you looked at, other models?
No, that's probably where it's the back of the envelope idea. We need to possibly look again at that, and the music industry does do something like adjacent in terms of how it wants to address sexual harassment, but nobody's actually tried to do what we're trying to do.
Right. Okay.
So it's never been done.
Okay. It strikes me as well that I think what you're doing, you set up at a similar time to the Live Comedy Association, and we were chatting earlier on. Equity have quite a presence, but I think it's a desire to be more involved in comedy. Those two specifically, but also there might be other organisations that you've spoken to in terms of giving you support, because it strikes me that both of those, the LCA and potentially Equity, might be interested in what you're doing. Have you had conversations with them or anybody else?
Yeah, we did. We had conversations with the LCA very early on, and they're very supportive in terms of they're not going to they're not going to disagree with the ethics of it. But the LCA in itself is a board, like, I don't know if I'm right or not, but it's a kind of very specifically set up to do one or two kinds of things. It doesn't have the structure to really address complaints of that kind of nature. So while it was able to support us in theory, it wasn't able to support us in the mechanism of what we were trying to do. Interestingly, Equity were kind of interested. I think they were like, what is this? But then I think because we've kept going and Kiri's very good at this, I think because we've kept going and we're very consistent, Equity are now looking at us and kind of going, almost like, how can we learn from you?
Right.
Because they've set up this Equity, the charter. So they now want to look at how they can tackle sexual harassment, and now they're asking us for advice, and they're asking us how they can support us. So that's really good.
Anyone else? Any other trade unions? Or, I mean,
No, not so far. No.
Okay.
Excuse me, I've got a scoot. It's a time thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for coming. You've done and you are doing some fundraising shows. There's fundraising shows for a million things within comedy, right? There's a lot of them.
Luckily, Kiri knows really famous people.
Hurrah! So you've done some of those already?
Yeah, we did a massive one with, our first one was at Comedy Store in London. We had Russell Howard, Nish Kumar, Sarah Pascoe. Like, it was brilliant. Like, it was great. And then we had a big one in Edinburgh. We had a big one at the Frog. We just had one at the Stand. What's annoying about them is that we don't want to keep asking, really. I think Jason Manford's going to do one for us. We don't want to keep asking comedians to do work for free to pay for this. We do really want to get to a place where, you know, private individuals aren't having to either give the time or put their hands in the pockets. We really do want to get to a place where we can pay for it.
But presumably they generated quite a bit of money.
They generated, well, if you think it's $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
To keep us going, and we've done 4. It's not enough, Geoff.
No, okay.
Yeah, it's not enough.
You've talked a bit about how you set it up and how it's going. How sustainable do you think it is? And I'm not saying that from a horrible point of view. I'm just aware that, you know, I think the LCA, it's fair to say, has morphed over time and is sort of trying to find its feet. And what you're trying to do is to formalise something within a sector which is really not formalised at all. Are you confident about Get Off? You've talked about where you'd like it to be, but I'm only asking you because I think what you're doing is great, and I think it's important, but I also recognise that it's a very unformalised sector. How are you feeling now? We're sort of out of the pandemic. You've had some success with fundraising events. Lots of people are phoning. What's she called? Lindsay, etc., etc., etc. Are you and Kiri confident?
I think recently we have got on board some really energetic and positive people that have started to work with us, and I think their energy has brought a sort of renewed vigour that we really needed. So at the moment I would say yes, I'm confident. If anything, yes, I do have my days where I'm like, oh my god, I'm so cynical, because I just can't understand why you just aren't getting on with it and sending us your money. But these people are telling me, and they're just great, and they're just saying things like, it's at the tipping point, come on, just wait, just keep going, and I've just got that voice in my head, I think we all have, and it's like, we're just going to keep going, we just got to see. Let's just think, and this is going to sound so sentimental and so cheesy, but you know, these instances of sexual harassment, they are real, and when you're getting down to the sort of bean counting and all that, you do sort of have to remind yourself why we started and just keep going, see what happens.
Is there less at the beginning? So we're going to wrap up in a minute, but at the beginning you talked about the sort of, I can't remember what you called it, but people chatting on WhatsApp groups and stuff about things.
Yeah, I think there is.
Is there less of that or more of that?
We might have forced it underground, but I do think I've seen, and I'd be interested to see what other people think. So there was this thing where there was a list put out with very good intentions by people that were just at the end of the tether because they didn't know what to do. But I have seen a reduction in general outing. And I think that's because we're starting to have more adult conversations about impact. And also, when things start, what I've started to see on threads, which makes me very happy, if someone starts saying something like, oh, have you heard about such a body? Someone will put a comment on, have you spoken to Get Off? So I think we're starting to take it out of the gossip rooms and into a more formalised environment where it can be dealt with more appropriately. Having said that, and I always say this, if you've been a victim of something and you decide you want to shout it from the rooftops, that is entirely up to you. That's your right. We're not here to silence anyone. But it's not your right to speak on somebody else's behalf.
Is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't talked about? Are there any questions or comments from anybody that's here? Is there?
I think, gosh, you probably had enough of me. Honestly, if anyone's got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Any questions or comments from anybody? No?
No?
Sounds great.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean?
lovely.
Is it something that you would ever kind of like look to expand into kind of other industries, or you kind of really want to keep it comedy focused?
I think, we'd love to keep it, we'd love to just make sure it works in the comedy industry. It was really interesting when we were setting it up, and I was speaking to sort of a business consultant at the council that was trying to work out whether it was a CIC or a charity, and they couldn't get their heads around it. They were like, this doesn't really fit a model. And they were like, we've never seen this before. So that was it was interesting because they were like, nobody's ever done this. So I think it's a nice thing in the idea that if it did work, if we could make it work, I'd be more than happy for someone else to take the model and apply it to a different industry.
Yeah.
If it could help make things safer. Yeah.
And also, how do you look after yourself? Because this is a really heavy subject and very emotionally charged, and how do you guys look after each other whilst doing all of this?
I think we're just a really good supportive group, and I've long since processed my incident, and if anything I've found this a really positive way of doing it because I just buried it. So I feel really good about doing something with it. So yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope that wasn't too painful.
No, not at all.
And
Thank you for having us.
I think if there's stuff that, this is my last year of doing Leicester Comedy Festival, so I can't speak about the future, but if there's stuff that Leicester Comedy Festival can do, I think that would be a good thing.
I'd love that.
And keep going, because I think what you're doing is really important. So
Thanks, Geoff.
So thank you for coming, thank you for watching, and thank you to Nina. Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Geoff.